Hey, all you rad dads out there.
Well, Dan, thanks for taking the time to come on the Rad Dad Show. I'm going to start the way we always start by asking, who are you?
Man, that's a great question. I ask myself every day. um, well, I'm Dan Davidson. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, St. Albert, actually. And yeah, I've been doing music for my entire adult life. You know, from the time I was 19, I started a rock band with a bunch of friends out here that I met at Grant MacEwan Music College, and we had a really cool ride. We made this band called Tupelo Honey in the early 2000s, and very quickly, we found ourselves opening for bands like Billy Talent and Metric and 3 Days Grace and Shinedown and Clutch, and eventually we were looked up and we're playing arenas with bands like Bon Jovi, and it was pretty wild and pretty fast pace. It was a cool experience, especially because I was so young. I was only
Yeah.
probably 24 when I played my first 17,000 seater arena,
Oh my God.
and yeah, so like it's just how do you set that bar and get back to it? And but the thing that was so cool is that we were doing it all by ourselves. It was an indie thing. It was like 2008, something like that, when the industry was at its absolute worst. So we would sell 1,000 tickets in Edmonton, and all these labels from New York and LA would fly out and see us, and everybody would be fired the next day. So
Yeah.
we kind of had to like be those DIY guys and figure out how to do what the major label bands do and compete on a shoestring budget from the suburbs of the prairies of Canada, which was an interesting battle. It taught me a lot, and really good ride. We did a lot of cool things, top 40s, toured North America, and it definitely kind of came to a point where things fizzled out. Rock and roll wasn't the same as it was, and we didn't
Yeah.
really think we felt like we were smoking our tires a little bit, and tried some new things. Some guys went one direction, some went the other, and I started writing country music. And since there, to put it, the short story of it all is basically I wrote a song that came out, and really quickly it became one of the top selling independent songs in Canada, and now it's platinum, and since then I've just been keeping up with the pace of that song, and I've toured in 9 countries, and it's wild. I never thought, lightning very rarely strikes twice in the music industry, but I guess I'm one of the lucky ones. So here I am in my late 30s, family man, and I'm still somehow making music with my friends and seeing the world.
Well, yeah, congratulations. That's a pretty amazing story. And like I mentioned kind of before we got started, like I remember you from the Tupelo Honey days. And that's the time when I was in university and playing in bands and going to shows and stuff. So I remember seeing you guys there. And, when I saw that you guys, were sort of taking off, that seemed really natural to me. I knew you guys sort of had that. So I'm interested though, before we get into, you mentioned your family man, we're going to talk about that, but like, that transition from, like, you guys were kind of like hard rock, indie rock to country, like where does that come from? Is that, did you grow up listening to country when you were a kid? Like where does that come from, or was it just a style that felt natural to you?
Oh, it's so weird. Like I never in a million years would have ever thought I'd looked up and be playing country music for a living. Like it just wasn't on my radar as a kid, because when I was really getting into music in my early to mid teens, it was all pretty angry stuff. Like
Yeah.
I think I started getting involved in aggressive music, mostly through punk bands. Like I like Bad Religion and SNFU and
Yeah.
NoFX and bands like that. But I also kind of like had my finger on the pulse of the more commercial stuff, like Green Day and whatever was happening, Stone Temple Pilots
Yeah.
and things like that. Those are all like the first songs I learned on guitar. But as I got into high school, despite all of the exposure that my dad had given me to like Blue Rodeo and Lyle Lovett and Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson and the Eagles and all the Supertramp and like all these bands that he loved, I still was like in that zone where I wanted to make aggressive music, and I dabbled a little bit in some terrible metal bands, and after I graduated high school, I didn't know what else to do. I just knew that I was good at playing guitar, and so I applied for the Grant MacEwan music program, which
Yeah.
is it's anybody is that's heard of that school knows it's like one of the better music programs in Western Canada. And I was so surprised that I got in, and I was just kind of hanging on by the skin of my teeth, to be honest, for the first year. And but I met a lot of great people, and we found a lot of common ground in sort of the mainstream rock bands with these guys that I love playing with. So, we were looking at bands like Audioslave and Foo Fighters and Incubus,
Yeah.
and using those bands as kind of like the place that we all came together, kind of where our circles overlapped. And yeah, after some jamming and some trying some stuff out, we just knew that it was a great fit, and we loved playing together. And we kind of created this rock band. But as the years went on, and we were touring lots, I met a lot of great people that I'm finding I run into in country music a lot now. Like Dallas Smith is a great example. He was,
Yeah.
the lead singer of Default years ago, platinum selling rock band. And it's so funny. Like before I started my career, I was toying with the idea of doing some country stuff and unlocking that door that I'd always kept locked when I was doing rock. And so I called Dallas, and I went out to see him open for Florida Georgia Line. He was playing at Rexall Place, and I went to his after party, and people were just like losing their marbles over Dallas. And he wasn't even, the Dallas Smith that he is today, the
Yeah.
massive, like our biggest country artist in
Yeah.
this country. And he's like, man, you know what? You should think about this. Like, it's not much different from what we were doing before in the rock world. And, you got the right kind of a voice for it, right look for it. And your name's pretty country. And I was like, yeah, Dan Davidson does sound like a pair of jeans.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So, it honestly, it doesn't feel like I'm doing much different. Like I still have two of the guys from Tupelo Honey playing with
Yeah.
me. And so it's still the same jokes and still the same stories and still the same, van tunes that we have rocking. And it's just like, it's just a lot of fun. It just kind of feels like it's a different lens, but it's the same general direction. And yeah, so it honestly didn't feel like a big slap in the face, hard left turn kind of a situation. I'm finding ways to do it my way. Like the last thing I want to do is come across as being a guy that's just wearing a costume.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I really think that longevity for artists comes from personality, and so I'm trying to keep that in mind as I move forward into this genre, or maybe some of my old fans might think it's a little strange.
Well, you mentioned, Bad Religion, No Effects, like kind of growing up on some of that punk rock stuff. And you mentioned like, work ethic. And that's sort of something, a connection that I see when I look at sort of your country music career. Like there's a real DIY vibe to it, right? It's the same spirit that I sort of see there. And, that really shines through. Like you've got a real presence on your social media, and your videos are fun. And, a lot of those things I know you've sort of done yourself or had at least a big hand in it. And so, yeah, that really comes through in the music. And so I think there isn't that much of a difference there, other than, well, maybe the amps aren't turned up quite as loud, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's like it's Telecasters instead of Les Pauls now,
Yeah.
but it's kind of the same. But yeah, I think that's it, man. Like all those years slugging it out in the rock band, and
Yeah.
finding our way through the most terrible times of the music industry really set me up for an awesome indie career in country. Like when I came out, I didn't have to do all those things where I was making mistakes and finding out the hard way, because I already did it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I was able to kind of hit the ground at full sprint, and it was nice to not have to do all those years over again.
Yeah. And so we haven't even talked about, you're also a dad.
Yeah, I've got two little girls. I've got an 8-year-old who's turning 9 right away, Georgia, and a 6-year-old who's turning 17, I think, right away. She's
That happens
Juliet.
about that time, eh?
Yeah, so they're a lot of fun. I think it's always so funny to see what their take is on what I do for a living. Like, they're growing up as little kids, and I've got the garage transformed into the bridge of the Starship Enterprise
Yeah.
with cardboard, and all my friends dressed up in stupid costumes. Like I'm probably the only dad they know that has a full costume department from all the music videos I do.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, it's interesting. Like growing up for me, my dad was a big fancy lawyer at a high rise apartment, or a high rise office downtown Edmonton, and it was all suits and very official. And I'd take my kids to my office, and it's just like goofy crap on the walls and a bunch of my friends hanging out, and so it's a different side of the mirror, but the same principles apply, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. That's really cool. I mean, your kids get to see sort of a different, I guess, have a different experience with their dad, right? Than maybe a lot of kids do. Do you think, so normally I ask whether you think you're a rad dad. I'm going to start by asking, do you think your kids think you're a rad dad?
I think they do, only because their friends think it's interesting that that
Yeah.
I have a job that makes me seem younger to them than I actually am, potentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I can hold on to like cool dad for at least a couple more years. But I think I've got that embarrassing gene in me. I'm one just one step away from showing up in a moose costume at school one day to pick them up.
Yes. Sometimes we can't help it, right?
Yeah, no, I do think they think it's cool that I get to do music for a living, and I think they know that it's different than what a lot of dads do. And
Yeah.
the thing that I always thought was really interesting about being a dad in music is that when you tell people what you do for a living and they know you have kids, they kind of assume that you're a bit of a hands-off dad and you're gone all the time. And yeah, we do have to tour sometimes, but for me, I feel like I get, like, especially in their younger years, I feel like I get way more daytime hours than a lot of the dads that I know, because I'm working at nights or I'm gone on the weekends, or my schedule, I don't have time I have to log in or
Yeah.
log off. I can kind of, so when they were little and they were napping, I would get work done, and my wife's got a pretty 9 to 5 kind of job, so I was kind of just at home during the day, we just make it work. And I
Yeah.
was really thankful for that, because I think I got some experiences that a lot of guys don't get to have.
I think that's a really good point. Like we talked to lots of musicians on this show, and a lot of people have kind of a similar thing to say. Like, I think there's some trade-offs, right? Because there's times when you're going to be away. Like, you just got back from Australia, right?
Yeah, so
So
it's true. There's times where it's like, oh man, this sucks. I'm
yeah,
missing stuff, or it's like, I feel like I'm piling too much on my wife, who's trying to juggle her job plus getting the 2 kids to hockey and ringette and musical theater and piano, and it's a lot. Like, going away even for a couple weeks kind of makes me really appreciate what single parents have to go through, and
hmm,
how much extra work and extra planning and all that goes into it. So yeah, I'm really lucky to have a supportive partner through all this, because yes, the odd time I do have to go away, and most of the time when musicians do get booked on things, it's always inconvenient.
yeah,
It's always in the middle of a vacation, or it's like you have to miss a Christmas concert or whatever, things like that. That's definitely a bit of the downside, but like I said, like, the upside is, for example, in the summertime, it's all just festivals. So it's
yeah.
flyouts on the weekend. So the girls are off school and I get to hang out with them and sit in the backyard in the kiddie pool, and I'll drink a beer. They'll have a popsicle. It's a great day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Like, and you're right, there's so many people that don't have that opportunity. So it's good to sort of find those silver linings. And I guess everybody's situation is a little bit different, right? But you have to find what works for you and your family. Are there, like, how do you manage when you're away? Like, what are those? I mean, we have things like FaceTime and stuff. How, in your family, how do you guys sort of deal with that, maintain that connection?
Well, like I think I was telling you before the podcast started, like, my wife and I live very close to my parents, my sister, my in-laws. So we've got the babysitters like fully triangulated here. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
we definitely have a support system, which has been huge for us.
Awesome.
And yeah, like, I don't know how my parents did it. Like, when they had 4 kids by the time they were 29, 2 provinces from anyone that they knew, and that's just like insane to me.
Hmm.
But for me, we have lots of people to lean on, and there is, I can't believe that we have FaceTime. That's so good. Even in Australia, I'd stay up till midnight and say hi for a little bit. Just even having that once a day, it just changes everything. I can't imagine the days of touring and having to find some hepatitis-y old phone booth to call my wife and kids from.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing, right? That's awesome. Um, So, okay, well, that's great. So yeah, you guys, it sounds like you've got a good support network too around, which makes such a huge difference. Yeah, we were chatting about that before. It's like such a blessing to have that, right? Not everybody does have it. So, yeah, that's awesome. So I asked if your kids think you're a rad dad. What about you? Do you think you're a rad dad?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of rad. I'm I'm partially rad. Um, yeah,
Well,
man. I don't
how
know.
do you define it? What makes a rad dad?
I guess it's just being present seems to be the big thing. And it's honestly it's the hardest thing to do too because
Yeah.
when you can't sign out of your job and your job is to always be answering emails and taking care of business because it's like I'm the only guy that works at the company. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I got to keep the wheels rolling. So when emails come in, and I've been really consciously making an effort of just like, okay, at least when the girls get home from school to the time they go to sleep, don't do anything important. Let's just focus in on those times, and that's been really good. I think it's important, but I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not missing any of those moments because I think the girls they're getting to an age now where I'm seeing flashes of them as older people. Like I'm seeing
Yeah.
them, I could see how they're kind of coming into what could possibly resemble a teenager one day. And it freaks me out, honestly. Like I just sometimes like I want to read them bedtime stories like the ones that they used to love when they were
Yeah.
4 or like sing them the songs that they used to love just because I want to hold on to those little moments and they go so fast. And I think now that that's becoming more and more apparent to me, that I'm just really trying to dig in and make sure that I'm soaking in every minute of them being little and having that that baby fat and those
Yeah.
like cute weird things that they say and all that stuff. So yeah, man, I think that's the big one for me. Just being present and being involved. Like I was saying earlier, being able to have those daytime hours. Like I was able to volunteer at kindergarten, like tie skates when the kids would go skating or
Yeah.
whatever, those kinds of things. For my oldest daughter, and then COVID hit, so it was a little tricky to volunteer with the younger one. But now we're getting back to it, and just trying to be involved and make sure that I'm clicked in.
Yeah, you mentioned that it's kind of tough sometimes to be present, right? And agree with you, especially in this day and age. But you also, like you said, you're one man business, so you have to be responsive to emails and all that stuff that's coming in and planning and whatever. Do you have like strategies that you use to help you be more present? Like, is it just sort of being mindful of it, or are there actual things you do? I know some people turn their phone off certain times, whatever it is.
I think the big thing is I'm just trying to be better with my time. Like if I'm more effective in the morning, then I don't have to stress at night. So like I really try to make lists and treat it like it's a business. Like here's the things that I have to knock off the list today, or I'll make
Yeah.
a schedule. Like I'm going to spend an hour on this demo, and then I have to spend an hour making phone calls, and I have to, it's kind of like things like that help me that for when I get home and my brain's not being like, oh my God, I didn't get anything done today. It's just kind of more like, okay, well, we made a chip in the pile and we can pick it up tomorrow. And I think it's a mentality thing, honestly. I'm finding that to be helpful just to take a breath and be like, especially this time of year, it's winter time, not much is going to happen. Got all kinds of time to catch up. Let's just take it bit by bit here.
Yeah, we like live in such a fast-paced world too. Like you'll always feel like I need to respond to that right away, but the reality is you don't need to, right? What you need to do is your kid's like pulling on your shirt today and right now and wants to read with you. So that's what you should do. It's hard though. Like I'll be the first person to say it's hard. I struggle with it too. Um,
Yeah, somebody told me the other day that I thought said something that was interesting, and it's like it's so good to look back and kind of give yourself a pat on the back of what you've done and what you've accomplished over the year, or for example, and be like, you know what, in your head you always have this thing like, oh my God, I haven't done enough, I'm never gonna like keep up to the herd. But if you look back and be like, I've had that feeling all year and look what I've
mhm.
accomplished. So maybe it's just keep a good pace and have some confidence in yourself, and you won't have that stress. And that's honestly what it comes down to for me, is it's just this crippling fear of not keeping my head above water while everyone else is sprinting. But we're all in the same boat when it comes down to it. So I'm starting to realize that we're all having that feeling, and everyone's kind of
Yes.
in the same boat.
Yeah, and nobody's comparing, themselves to you. Everyone's kind of thinking that like other people are looking at what, and judging you based on what you haven't done, but everyone feels the same way is the reality, right? We all
Yeah.
are just worried about, did we get enough done? And we just need to chill out. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, and in the grand scheme of things, it's like if I don't get this demo done, for example, or if I
Yeah.
don't get whatever this thing done by the end of the day, is that gonna make me more upset, or is missing coaching my daughter's hockey practice and her being sad gonna make me more upset? I think the answer is pretty clear there, which is the right choice.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You talked about fears a little bit, and I'm curious. So you became a dad just about 9 years ago, you said.
Mhm.
So big transition kind of happening around that time in your life, right? Or at least when you had little kids. So did you have any fears about becoming a dad?
Oh yeah, totally. It was a very crazy time in my life because Tupelo Honey had literally shut down. Well, we were just about to shut down. Like I could tell we were kind of like everyone was ready to do something new. And yeah, so I didn't have a whole lot of money, and I went back to school, and I was just starting my business degree, you know, and my wife's pregnant. We live on the west side, and it was just like I had felt like so much was new to me, and uncertain. The grounds were shifting. I didn't know if I had a music career in my future, but I knew that's what I wanted. I didn't know how I could help provide for my family.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how my wife felt about me not having a direction. I felt like a bit of like a rudderless ship for a minute there. And yeah, it was kind of nice though when Georgia was born, because it was a little bit centering. Like it kind of puts things into perspective a little bit, and we just kind of took a breath from all the craziness that seemed to be happening around our lives and being uncertain of what the future looked like. And we kind of realized, okay, like we've got something pretty good here. We've got this beautiful little girl. We've got a house. We're happy. We live near our family. We're not rich yet, but we're not old, so we have time to
Yep.
work and build more for ourselves. Um, so it was a bit of a mind shift, and it was inspiring to me because it's like, okay, look what I've done so far. I can keep this going and find a way to make it work. And with a little bit of hard work and a little bit of luck, things started to pick up and turn around. And then when Juliet was born, our second daughter, things were kind of rolling with the country career, and I felt a little bit more confidence. And now at this stage in my career, I've got a publishing deal, and I'm writing and producing for other people. So the uncertainty of the artist game is kind of mitigated a little bit with
Right.
some other skills that I've developed. And yeah, it's funny how life can just kind of fall into piece in the right way. Like I'm not going to tell you that I've made it. I'm not worried about anything in the world, but I
You're still
definitely am
working
a lot
hard.
more
Yeah.
yeah, like I'm a lot more comfortable in my skin than I used to be. And I think being a dad has helped that a lot. Just understanding myself a little bit more,
Yeah.
and yeah, just I guess developing that skill to take a breath and learn that you can figure anything out, really.
Yeah. It's all like kind of giving you some perspective, maybe.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well,
It's funny. Like my dad said something to me that always stuck with me, and I think it could be applied to like professional situations, but it also can be applied to just a general outlook on life. He's he said, "Be great and don't go away," and that's kind of like my motto for my music career.
I love
So
that.
yeah.
That's awesome. Be great and don't go away.
Mhm.
I'm writing that down.
There you
Um,
go.
so yeah, that's great advice. So are there things about you that have changed since becoming a dad? Anything you can put your finger on?
I think it would be hard to tell from looking inward. But as I go back and I'll watch old interviews of me in Tupelo Honey, or just kind of like reminisce about about those days in
Yeah.
my young 20s, my mid, I guess even to my mid to late 20s. Yeah, I see that I handled things differently, and I handled stress a lot differently, and yeah, now I think twice a lot more. I find, and that's probably just a getting older thing. I'll assess the risk. But I think there's still that side of me that that'll throw it all on red once in a while, and that's led
Yeah.
to some pretty interesting situations, and it's been helpful. It's a bit of an entrepreneurial brain, I think, to take big swings once in a while,
Yeah.
and I think in this business, that's one side of me that's as a dad that I get scared of when that side flares up. I'm like, oh God, what am I doing here? Like, for example, when my daughter Juliet was about 3 or 4 months old, I had a grant to go shoot a video. And we were going to do this, just a nice video somewhere in Canada, but my video director and I decided, we're like, you know what, let's blow the whole budget. We're going to go to Japan for 6 days. We're going to shoot the craziest video we can, just me and you and one other guy, and see what happens. So like, I somehow, my wife okayed that I was allowed to leave her with a toddler and a baby and go to Japan for a week. But that led to so many great looks for me with that single,
Yeah.
and it kind of started snowballing the story of me being the crazy video guy, and it just, it was a good move, even though it was an uncomfortable move. So I guess, like, now that I've done it a few times, getting to that point where knowing if the big swings are going to be uncomfortable in a good way or uncomfortable in a bad way
Yeah.
is becoming a skill.
And you're balancing out, like, is this risk going to, totally flop for me personally, or is it going to have, negative consequences for my family too, right? So you're factoring all those things in. So like, I'm kind of curious, like, your thoughts on that, like, I guess balancing your family's interest versus your interest, like, how do you guys do that? Like, I'm sure you're making these decisions together. We've talked about a couple examples, but like, how does that factor in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of a trust thing. Like, my wife Jen kind of knows if I come to her with something that sounds crazy, I've thought it through a little bit. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not just throwing stuff at the wall. Because there is some things that are a little wild. Like this last Australia tour, it seemed like it was going to be so expensive, and it was super expensive. But I was able to pull it off with grant funding, and I had a single that started doing really well. So she's been along for the ride with me for so long. I think that she understands kind of the direction I'm going in, and it's definitely not easy when she's really high up at her company, and she's got to kind of run the ship there and be there. But like I said, like, that support system we have is great if we need kids picked up from school or whatever. um but yeah, so it is a bit of a balancing act, and every situation is kind of different. We don't really have a
Yeah.
system, I guess, per se. It's just, we just talk it out a lot, and see what's going to work. And honestly, it does suck sometimes for Jen, my wife, because she's, here's a perfect example of one situation. I was like, oh my God, I feel so bad, but I need to do this. I was invited to go to a songwriting camp that the CCMAs and SOCAN put on in the Dominican Republic, and so it's
Wow.
mid February, like minus a million in Edmonton, just pouring snow, and I'm down in the Dominican writing with some of my buddies. And there was one day I remember calling her in the middle of the day. We're having like a break, and I was just like fighting it, like, just not really a great writer that day. I didn't have any good ideas, and called her. I was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And she's like, "Oh, it's okay. How about you?" I'm like, just having a rough day here at this right, and just really really fighting it. And she's like, "Yeah, you're fighting it. Well, I just had the snow blow for the third time today."
Yeah.
So, and I was like, "Oh yeah." Yeah, it's we kind of, we laugh about those things a little bit, but like, even when we were in Australia just a couple weeks ago, I was talking with my guitar player Darren, and he's like, "Man, it's really hard to downplay how much fun we're having to the wives when we're getting such a good tan." So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's things like that, because there are some perks of the job where it's a fun job. Like, I get to travel the world and make music with my friends, and I know that that's rare to be able to do that for a living. And yeah, I just like, I feel like it's not always easy to hear for a significant other who's overworked and overloaded, and it's not always fair. So I definitely try to find ways to not rub that in my
Rub it
wife's
in.
face.
Yeah.
But
But at the
there's
same time, you probably come home, and because of those awesome experiences, like that translates to your home life too, right? Like it's fulfilling you individually. And so, and that also passes on to your family too. We talk a lot about that on the show, right? Like
Yeah,
taking care of yourself too. So I think it's not
that's
all,
important.
doesn't
I
always come at the expense of the other.
I think that's true. Yeah, like I've done. I guess on the flip side of the coin, I've done so many terrible jobs that I hated, and I remember the state I was in, working jobs that weren't going anywhere, and they weren't paying great, and I was just doing it because I had to. And yeah, like a music career takes a lot of those years sometimes, and it's character building. And I think that I'm lucky enough to be with somebody who lets me celebrate the fact that I've got to a point where I don't have to do that anymore, and that's pretty cool. And it is funny though, when you go out somewhere, like if I'm meeting parents of like my kids' friends or
Yeah.
something like that, they'd be like, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" I'd be like, "Oh, I'm a musician." And I could tell that a lot of people automatically be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, like weekend warrior guy here,
Yeah.
just thinks he's a rock star." But I'm like, no, I'm like, yeah, and I don't want to ever be the guy who's like, "Yeah, here's my resume." And but my wife will jump in and kind of just like lightly say like, it's serious. He actually does do this for a living, and it's
Yeah.
not
He's
playing
got a
chicken wing
platinum
bars. And
single.
yeah, so it's nice. I feel the support from her there. And but it is kind of a funny thing though when the stigma of being a musician, and that's not a super famous one. I'm just a guy that's doing all right, but yeah, I don't know.
Right.
Don't know
Like
where
how
I'm going
many,
with that.
yeah, how many people who walk into Long and McQuaid like are a musician, right? Like
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with doing that at
yeah,
all, but it's just sort of one of those things where people kind of look at you funny, and I feel like I have to explain myself, and I hate that.
yeah. There,
So,
yeah, you're right. That's interesting.
yeah.
There is sort of like maybe a stigma because it's so rare to be, I think, to be able to make a real career out of it, which is,
Mhm.
something you should be even more proud of, right? That's pretty cool. You talked about your dad a couple times. So what's your relationship like with your dad?
Oh, it's great. Like I'm really lucky. I'm really close with my parents, and we spend a lot of time together. My dad and I love to bond over music, and that's been kind of a thing that we've had for a long time. It is so funny that all those years of riding around, taking those long trips to Manitoba to go to the lake and listening to all his music, it's like it like finally paid off in this in this country career or something. He's
Yeah.
put all these subliminal messages in me, and it finally came to the surface. But honestly, it's really great. He's starting to kind of slow down a little bit in his work capacity. Like he's not taking on as much as he used to, so he's got a little bit more time. And he grew up in a house where I think like his mom, my grandma, wouldn't really let him explore the possibility of diving into music any harder than taking piano lessons or the odd guitar lesson. Because I think at the time, in a small community with a pretty straight laced family, I think she had it in her mind that being in a rock band meant you're doing drugs or something like
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
So that was never even an option for him. But he loved music so much, and I grew up, going to sleep, and my dad would be playing guitar to me, or like playing Beatles tapes, or
Awesome.
so. Yeah, he was just always really great dad. He was my hockey coach all the time, and we spent a lot of time. He would travel a lot for work too. Actually, when I was a kid, he was a lawyer, and so he'd be up north doing stuff for weeks at a time sometimes. But I don't even remember ever feeling like he was away because he was so present when he was there. And so maybe that's a bit of a takeaway that I never really knew that I absorbed, to be honest. But yeah, really, really great person. And this year, actually, it was kind of a fun thing. Now, maybe you start to understand your parents a little more when you become a little bit older. And now I'm at an age where I remember my dad being as old as I am now and
Yeah.
thinking he was an old man, but it clearly wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think from this side of 30, I really understand my parents a little bit better and understand the mentality that you keep as you grow older. And so I find that we connect a lot more on a friend level than we used to.
Yep.
it used to be just more of a father-son thing, and now I just feel like I can just talk to him, guy to guy, which is kind of cool. And this year we actually recorded a song together as
No
just like
way.
a fun thing to do. Yeah, like we haven't put it out into the world, but you know, uh, he's a big Willie Nelson fan. I'm a big Willie Nelson fan. We went to see him years ago together, and so we did a duet, a Willie Nelson cover that I recorded over last Christmas, and it was just like it was a cool moment. I could tell he was really proud of it, and he really loved it, and it was like experience that I think he really treasures. So hopefully we'll get to do it again and just kind of keep building up this tradition. I think it's kind of fun.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's neat that you guys get to have that experience. I sort of have a similar experience with my dad in terms of, as I've gotten older, kind of, you know, I think understanding each other on a bit of a different level, and having that friendship. I think that's a really special thing. Um,
Hmm.
and I like that, you know, you're able to kind of reflect on when you were a kid and how you felt about your dad and how you felt when you're around him. Like that's such an interesting thing that I think, like you just said, I didn't even really realize that sort of, became a part of me, but it does, right? Like almost can't help it. So it's just another reminder why we
Yeah,
have to do that for
it's.
our kids too, right?
I think you're right. Like I honestly, it is nice to have a bit of a role model there, and to just especially I grew up with all sisters. I have three sisters, and to see how he treated these girls was such a good just a good indicator of how girls should be treated, and I think it put it in their minds that they don't need to settle for anything less than somebody that treats them great. And for as a dad of daughters now,
Yeah,
that's a big thing for me, is just like trying to install some self confidence, and just like show them a bit of a roadmap, and hopefully they can pick that up from how I treat my wife, and how I treat women. And I think that's super important for them to see. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just like it's a role
totally.
model in a bit of a different capacity.
Yep, totally. Yeah, I'm a dad to two girls too, and so it's something I think about a lot. And I think
Mm-hmm.
comes up on this show a little bit too. Is like, how do we raise our kids to sort of be prepared for the world that they're going to have to experience? And you kind of hinted at it earlier, like you're getting these glimpses of them as like individuals and teenagers. And I think what you're, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth. I don't think so though. Like, is them sort of not needing you anymore, and at that point where they're kind of becoming teenagers, that's when they kind of become a little bit more vulnerable in that way too, right? So these are things that we start to think about as parents, right? And
Totally.
how do we prepare our kids for that? That's a tough
Yeah,
thing.
that's a question I feel like I'm asking myself a lot lately. It's just like
Mhm.
because I have a friend who's got a daughter that just turned like 14 or something, and it's just like a switch goes off, and they become a little bit more introverted. They want to like have some time alone. Maybe they're just like, I don't know, like there's a whole thing, and I remember going through it. I
Yeah,
remember the world became a little bit more inside my own head. um yeah, you just hope that you can develop. I guess all we can hope for as good parents is to hope you develop that relationship where even when they're going through that weird time, that they're still able to at least communicate when they need to step out of that and
yeah,
have a hug from dad or something, right?
yeah. When they need help, or yeah, you just want to create an environment where they don't feel judged, and they can
Mhm.
come to you if they need you, I guess. Because yeah, we
That's
know it's
it.
coming, right?
Oh man, it's so coming. The thing that's like always freaks me out a little bit too is you want to teach them about the world and prepare them for situations without freaking them out and like telling
Yes.
them too much too soon.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
So
balancing act too, right? Especially because they're exposed to so much too. Like, I don't know about your kids. My oldest daughter is just about to turn 7, and like she's found YouTube, and it's like the floodgates are open. Like, no
oh
matter
yeah,
how we restrict it, and like find ways to limit it, and do watch things under supervision and where we can explain things, they're exposed to things that like we
like
can't
even in
control.
ads,
Yes.
right? Like little things pop up that you know you're not quick. You can't be quick enough to catch it all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, we found that too. Like with our girls, when they got into YouTube, I had to sit with them and make sure I was watching what channels they were watching and stuff. Because there's just like some channels that are kind of sneaky, and they
There's
just
a lot
throw
of
in stuff.
weird stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so we tried to wean off the YouTube a little bit, and it seems to have worked. But yeah, only for so long. Like you said, like it's a strange thing because you can't control what other people's kids are doing,
Yep.
and so I'm like a hard line on I don't want anybody to have a phone
Hmm.
until they're X age or whatever. But at the same time, like, our oldest is 9 and she wants to go to sleepovers and stuff. And I know she's a kind of a timid person. And I know if she was scared, she wouldn't go find her friend's mom to tell her to come pick me up. So
Yep.
we want to like send her with a phone so she can call me or text me if she needs to. And it's just this weird line where that the devices and stuff is kind of it's part of being that's part of the world now. It's not like
Yeah.
you can't really stop it. And I always find that funny with new parents, like we're never going to let our kids ever have devices. I'm like, yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. Like I just heard on the radio yesterday or the day before, like I think the Canadian Pediatric Society or something, they've just changed their recommendations on screen time. It was kind of like pretty strict before about limiting screen time. And now it's more focused on, well, it's just if you're going to have screen time, it should be like healthy screen time, like educational and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So I think everybody's starting to realize like this is inevitable. It's about when, and when are they prepared, and making sure they have the tools. Like if you pretend like phones don't exist and YouTube doesn't exist, like they're going to go to their friend's house. That's the first thing they're going to want to do, right? Is access that
100%.
stuff, and they're not going to be prepared to deal with what they see. So, yeah, it's an interesting time, and I feel like it is kind of right around that like 6-7 years old where they're kind of just getting smart enough to realize like some of the stuff they're seeing, but they're not mature enough to really understand it.
Totally. I think that, and the biggest tool seems to be a confidence in their understanding of what right and wrong is. Because I think
Yeah.
like most good kids will know when they shouldn't be doing something. But I like as a kid, I remember I was a pretty shy kid, and I remember like I 9 times out of 10 I probably wouldn't have been like, guys, I shouldn't be doing
Yeah.
this. Uh, Especially for girls, I find it's extra important, and I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just because I have girls and I'm more worried about them, but I just really want that to be something that I develop. And it's so hard to work on that without being forceful, but I think that confidence is going to be the key to making great decisions when it comes to devices and
Yeah.
how they interact with their friends online.
Yeah, and to like I think that trust piece is a big one too. Like, hey, if there's something you see that you don't understand or whatever, like you can always come ask me, or come tell me or whatever.
Mm.
That's kind of an approach that we sort of take a little bit too, is like okay, so the new Taylor Swift album dropped, right? Tons of swearing on that album. So this is kind of a dumb example, but like we listen to it a lot in our house. And I've got like a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. And
Yeah,
it's like, well, they know those words now. Like, and so it's like, well, how do you normalize that and teach them that like it's not something to be like, to laugh about or whatever. It's like something, you can't do at home. It's like, well, yeah, people say those words, but like you don't say those around your teacher. You don't say those
yeah,
to grandma and grandpa. Like, there's times when you can say it and there's times when you can't. And then it kind of seemed to work. Like they don't really care anymore. They just hear it and they're like, oh, that's a bad word. Okay, move on.
yeah. We get that. I've had the exact same experience. Like, it's in music that we listen to around the
Yeah.
house sometimes, and usually the girls would be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
dad," or if they catch us on the off time saying something, they'll call us on it, and then
Yeah.
we'll apologize and be
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. It wasn't really cool, and it's not." So I think they get it though. Like it's just they know that that's not a cool thing to do for a kid, or it's disrespectful,
Yeah.
and but man, I made the biggest mistake one time. I I recorded this song, and it was just like this drunken support group kind of a song, and it had just a huge f bomb in the chorus, and it worked for the song. It was good. It's a good beer garden song. People go crazy, and it's a lot of fun. But you know, I sometimes forget that my kids' friends think I'm cool, and their parents think it's interesting what I'm doing, and so our next door neighbor, they have a little girl that's the same age as Georgia, and they're like, "Oh, Dan's got a new song out," and they all got in the car, they're driving somewhere, they throw it
Crank it
on,
up.
and of course it's the uncensored version, and I was a hero to the 12-year-old boy, but that's about it.
Yeah,
They're like,
yeah.
"Why would he do that?" But yeah, it's so the parents are kind of laughing, and yeah, I mean,
That's hilarious.
it's one of those things where it's in music, and
Yeah.
I don't like to explain it when it's myself, but if it's on music that I'm listening to, it's a little easier to explain it away.
Yeah, it's a word people say sometimes, right? So it's just like I think if you take the mystique out of it, then but you understand, you set those boundaries, then it's clear they understand that. So it doesn't
Yeah,
become something they're going to seek out and say and do on their own, just to experiment.
yeah. I mean, my kids know them for sure, but I've never heard one of them say any of them. So
Yeah,
that's a good start.
perfect. So Dan, what do you have going on right now? Like what's new with you? What's coming down the road for Dan Davidson?
Well, it feels like it feels like this is the time of year where all the country musicians head back into their caves, and
Well, you
we
just
just
had a
like write a new
single.
record.
You just released a new
Yeah,
single.
yeah, it's this new single, "Girl Drinks Beer," is a song I did. It's really cool how this kind of stuff can happen. Um, like over COVID, everyone's looking for an angle, right? We're all looking for a new way to like be creative and come up with something cool to do. And I was involved in this kind of online conference between the Country Music Association of Australia and the Canadian Country Music Association. It was like this
Yeah.
wacky speed dating thing where they put a bunch of artists from both countries in these like little 5-minute Zooms. And so I met a ton of industry people, a ton of artists, and I hit it off with this guy Travis Collins. Just seemed like his music was kind of down the same zone as mine. His fans seemed similar. He's a dad, and we just kind of started chatting about a lot of that kind of stuff and kept in touch. And I had this song that seemed like a great way to kick off Australian summer and help Canadians forget that it's the deep freeze coming
Yeah.
and keep the party going. So yeah, I just kind of called them up and said, "Hey, I got this song. I'm coming to Australia. Do you want to get on this tune and we can just see what we can do with it?" And it was a lot of fun. Turned out great. It was a self-produced song, my first song I'd ever produced on my own that I put out. And yeah, man, big success so far. The Australians really loved it. We had a lot of people singing along. And so we're still working on that, still working that one online and coming up with new content for that all the time. And now it's just a little bit more of that. I've got most of a record written, and I'm kind of working on some new songs, some new content, contests. Man, it's just like this is the time of year where it's time to get ahead a little bit. And when it starts to get warm enough to tour, got all the ammo ready to go. So
Yeah.
it's that stage again.
So is it too soon to say like when we're getting a new album next year or
Well, I'm shooting for the summertime,
okay.
but it all kind of depends. Like I've been a serial indie artist for my entire career, but I've been chatting with a couple different labels and a couple different teams, and just trying to like grow my sphere a little bit so I can focus on just being the artist instead of being the manager, the artist, the tour manager, like all the
Yeah.
other hats that I've had to wear over the years, and yeah, so it's kind of an exciting time. It's usually I'll write and record a single and put it out, market it, write and record a single, put it out, and market it. It's all been very single focused, but
Yeah.
this time I'm gonna have a whole record done, ready to go, and I'm gonna see if I can find a partner for it, and if not, I'm just gonna if there's no match out there, I'm just gonna keep plowing ahead, doing my indie thing, but from a bit of a different angle, try and reinvent a little bit of the flavor that I've delivered before. It's kind of I'm finding it now at this stage in my career creatively to try and not repeat myself too much. So
Yeah.
trying out some new sounds and some different styles a little bit.
Awesome. Well, I'm stoked. The new single's great. Yeah, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on the show and talking about your family and your kids. I know it's a personal topic, but like we were saying in the beginning, everyone loves talking about their kids. So it's great. I appreciate your time. That's neat that we're on Zoom right now, but we're, like probably a 20-minute drive from each other. So sometime we'll have to get together for a beer here
Oh, I'd
soon.
love that, man. Anytime. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
get you out to a Rad Dads event. Any words of wisdom for parents out there listening, maybe for new dads?
Oh man, that's always such a tough one, man. Honestly, I don't know. I feel like just being able to roll with the punches a little bit has been my biggest winning strategy. You can have a plan of how things are going to go, but when you have little kids, it's never quite a neat package. You just kind of got to be able to be loose and roll with the punches a little bit.
That's great advice. I think yeah, that's a big change for us when we become parents. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, again, thanks for your time. It's been awesome chatting with you. And yeah, wish you all the best.
Well, thanks for having me, Brett. It's good to chat with you, man.
You bet. Take care.